On May 25th, 1996, a bright future vanished into thin air. Kristin Smart, a 19-year-old college student, disappeared after attending a party at California Polytechnic State University, leaving behind no clues and a community desperate for answers. Kristin Smart was a spirited young woman, full of ambition and dreams. Born on February 20th, 1977 in Augsburg, Germany, she grew up in an Air Force family and moved to the United States, eventually settling in Stockton, California. After graduating high school, Kristin enrolled at California Polytechnic State University, known for its rigorous academic programs and vibrant campus life. Friends described her as kind-hearted, outgoing, and determined. It was the start of her sophomore year, and like many of her peers, she was eager to embrace the college experience. On that fateful weekend in May 1996, Kristin attended a party at a fellow student's house near the campus. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and music. But as the night wore on, Kristin's friends noticed her growing more intoxicated. Concerned, they decided it was time to leave. But as they prepared to depart, they lost sight of her. Kristin was last seen leaving the party, seemingly in the company of a fellow student, Paul Flores. Little did anyone know, this would be the last time she would be seen alive. Her friends reported her missing the next day, igniting a search that would last for decades. The initial investigation into Kristin's disappearance began soon after her friends reported her missing. Local authorities acted quickly, launching a search that involved both police and volunteers. They scoured the campus and surrounding areas, utilizing search dogs and helicopters. But for days, nothing turned up. The timeline was murky. The last confirmed sighting of Kristin was around 2 in the morning, leaving the party with Paul Flores. Witnesses later recounted that Kristin seemed disoriented, a state exacerbated by her level of intoxication. As days turned into weeks, investigators began to focus on Paul Flores, who had been seen with her that night. When questioned, Paul denied any wrongdoing. He claimed he had left Kristin in the company of friends, but inconsistencies in his statements raised red flags for investigators. Why had he left the party without ensuring she got home safely? As the investigation progressed, search efforts intensified. Volunteers combed through the campus and nearby areas, while police continued to dig into Paul's background. What they uncovered would lead them down a dark path filled with secrets, lies, and unanswered questions. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they uncovered troubling details about Paul Flores. He was known to have a troubling history, with previous encounters with law enforcement linked to alleged sexual misconduct. Despite his cooperation, detectives sensed he was hiding something. Witnesses reported that Paul had been acting suspiciously around the time of Kristin's disappearance. He had been seen near the area where her body was eventually believed to be buried, and investigators were determined to connect the dots. In the months following Kristin's disappearance, Paul Flores became a person of interest. He was subjected to extensive questioning, and investigators began to piece together a timeline of his movements that night. However, every lead seemed to hit a dead end. Even with growing suspicions, there was no concrete evidence tying Paul to Kristin's disappearance. The lack of physical evidence meant the case was at a standstill, but investigators were unwilling to let it go cold. As the search for Kristin continued, Paul's life remained under a microscope, and the tension between the police and him grew increasingly palpable. The case took a dramatic turn in 2000, 4 years after Kristin's disappearance, when a public announcement urged anyone with information to come forward. This revival of interest brought new witnesses and fresh leads. One key witness claimed to have seen Kristin and Paul together that night, but their account did not align with Paul's version of events. As the pressure mounted, Paul Flores's demeanor changed. In 2002, he he was the subject of a civil lawsuit filed by Kristin's family, which alleged that he was responsible for her disappearance. Although he denied any wrongdoing, this lawsuit opened the door for further investigation and scrutiny. In 2004, a search warrant was executed on Paul's home, and investigators uncovered evidence that suggested he had lied about his whereabouts on the night Kristin disappeared. Still, without a body, charging him with a crime proved to be a challenge. It wasn't until 2016 that the case gained renewed attention, fueled by a podcast that highlighted the inconsistencies in Paul's statements and urged the public to become involved in the case once again. The podcast reignited the community's interest in Kristin Smart, and with it came new tips and renewed hope for her family. In April 2021, after years of investigation and mounting pressure, Paul Flores was finally arrested and charged with the murder of Kristin Smart. The arrest came as a shock to many, but for Kristin's family, it was a bittersweet moment. They had waited decades for justice, but the pain of losing their daughter remained. The trial began in the spring of 2022, and it was filled with emotional testimonies from friends and family who described Kristin as a vibrant young woman with dreams and aspirations. As the prosecution laid out their case, they presented evidence that included cell phone records, witness testimonies, and forensic analysis that suggested Kristin had been harmed. Paul's defense team argued that there was no physical evidence linking him directly to Kristin's disappearance, and they maintained his innocence. As the trial unfolded, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Every day brought new revelations, but also lingering uncertainties. Would the jury find enough evidence to convict Paul, or would he walk free once again? As the trial progressed, the jury was faced with a difficult decision. They deliberated for several days, weighing the evidence against Paul Flores. On March 16, 2023, Paul was found guilty of first-degree murder. But even with the verdict, the mystery surrounding Kristin's final moments remained unsolved. Where was she that night? What truly happened between her and Paul Flores? Kristin's family finally felt a sense of closure, but the unanswered questions lingered in the hearts of those who knew her. Kristin Smart's case is a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of seeking justice. It raises broader questions about the safety of young women on college campuses and the lengths families must go to find answers when a loved one goes missing. While Kristin may never be found, her legacy continues to inspire those who fight for justice and bring awareness to similar cases. The story of Kristin Smart is a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life.